Great.
Cool.
Cool.
Are we live?
Are we live?
Oh,
Can you hear me
working.
as well?
Wow.
Can everyone hear me?
Hello.
Great. Hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Sorry about the late start. There was a problem with the computer machine at the front. Hello, everyone. My name is Keith. This is Mario. And welcome to Keith and Mario's Guide to Continuous Deployments. Or a slightly longer version, if you're that way inclined, why automatically deploying your master branch to production is a good idea. I think it should really say great idea, or the best idea.
Best idea. Yep.
Good idea. Works well. This is my friend Mario, the man to my right, or to your left. He works at a place called Envato. May have heard of it. They do Theme Forest, NetTuts, that whole suite of products. Some quick fun facts about my friend Mario. If you Google howgoodischeese.com, you'll see that he is the CEO, CFO,
CTO,
CMO, whatever,
Yes.
Of howgoodischeese.com, top of Google. Check that site out. It's a great site. And one day, Mario hopes to be a Dogillionaire with the Bitcoins
Yep.
and the Dogecoins.
Yep. So here is, I'm presenting with Keith today. Now, Keith actually works on a startup called Buildbox. So Buildbox is a semi-hosted continuous integration service. So if you think something like Jenkins, but with a hosted UI, so like Jenkins, can't read any of your data and you use your own workers. So some fun facts about Keith. Every single picture I could find of him, apart from the one he gave me before, he seems to be eating a different Apple product. That, as you can see, is an iPad, and that is some sort of laptop. So Keith also, in 2007, won South Australian Magician of the Year.
Yeah, when that photo, those pigeons weren't there when that photo was taken.
Yeah.
That magic one there wasn't there either. That was photoshopped.
So Keith and I together worked on a few products where we've where we're going to show you some of the things that we've learned. So we worked together on a product called Envato Studio. So Envato Studio is a online marketplace for freelancers to sell their digital services. So a lot of the techniques that we'll be showing you today, we've originally sort of tried them on Envato Studio to begin with. That was about a year ago. And we also have worked on Desktoppr, which is a wallpaper sharing site for the user's Dropbox as a backend. So all the stuff that we're showing you is actually practical advice based on the things we've worked on.
Now, you may have noticed we have a bit of an accent, maybe. We're from a place called Australia, or commonly known to the locals as just Australia. We call ourselves Australians. Drop the Oz. It's just easier to say. We're a small island off the coast of New Zealand. This is kind of what it looks like. Mario here lives in the bottom right-hand corner. Not in Tasmania. We don't talk about that mob. But he is from Melbourne, and it looks a little bit like this. A lot of nice laneways. I think Melbourne was voted the number one livable city in the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very nice. You should all come visit. You're all very welcome. So back to the map. This is where I currently live. Keith lives all the way over here. So Keith actually lives about 2,500 miles away from me, about 4 hours flight. So Australia is very large. Perth, where he lives, looks a bit like this.
That's pretty much all that's there. Yeah.
There's no.
I'm just out of frame.
Yeah. No one really lives there, but there are some really beautiful beaches. So for all of our presentations that we're doing abroad, there are some requirements that we need to do beforehand. Before we get to the serious stuff, we have some fun facts.
Yeah, it's by law. We have to talk about this stuff.
So
we don't choose.
The first fact I'd like to share with you is in 1954, Bob Hawke sculled. He drank 2.5 pints of beer in 11 seconds, putting him in the Guinness Book of World Records. A few years later, we crowned him Prime Minister of Australia.
Mm-hmm. The first police force in Australia was made up of the most well-behaved convicts at the time. So you're doing less murdering today, Chief of Police.
Chief of Police. The two animals on the National Coat of Arms, the kangaroo and the emu, were chosen because they cannot walk backwards.
Of course. Yeah. I mean,
they can't escape from this position ever.
We have 20% of the world's poker machines, but only 0.33% of the world's population. It's quite depressing.
In the average lifetime of an Australian, they will consume 165,000 eggs.
And lastly, Australian billionaire politician Clive Palmer plans on building a replica of the Titanic called Titanic II. That's actually true. It's a great name too.
All right, so more back onto the serious business. So can I get some hands up in the audience? So anyone who has an application in production who has some sort of test server or CI server, can I get your hands up, please? Excellent, great amount of hands. Keep them up, though. Can I get them to keep them up? So anyone who, can I get anyone who, okay, can I get anyone who automatically deploys on green builds to production to keep your hands up? Okay.
Wow.
Anyone who's got your hands up, you're fine. You're golden. There's some other great talks on. You might get some benefit out of those, but we're primarily going to be concentrating on anyone with their hands down. So that's where we're going to start. So first of all, terminology. So there's two popular terms, continuous delivery and continuous deployment. People tend to use them interchangeably, but there is actually a difference. And you can get confused very easily. So the main difference is here. So at the top, we have continuous delivery. As you can see, we do the normal process of pushing our code. We run some tests on it, and then we have a manual step where we're doing some sort of deploy. So in continuous deployment, which is what we're talking about, we automate that last step. So any code that happens to hit your master branch will end up in production through an automated process.
Yeah, so you might be thinking, why would you want to do continuous deployment? Sounds a bit YOLO, or YOLO, as we Australians like to say. And so let's talk about why you would want to do such a crazy thing, Mario. Number one is fast feedback. In this new fandangled world of A/B testing and that sort of stuff, you want to get your code out to production as fast as possible. Like, we can use some science and try and figure out if when you're increasing conversions or trying to increase traffic on your website, you may think if we change just one word here, we might be able to increase signups by 20%. And those sorts of experiments are really, really handy, but you want to push those out to production really, really quick, because if they are detrimental, you want to get rid of them really quick. So getting fast feedback from real customers in production is really valuable. Confidence. You want to know that your deployment process is doing the same thing every single time, and that kind of leads into predictability. Manual deploys are quite error prone, especially when humans do it, because if you've got a bug in production and you want to get a fix out to your servers really quick, you're under a lot of pressure. Your teammates are like, "Why is that not in production yet?" And you can be stressed, and you might skip a step in your manual deploy process, especially if you've got multiple environments, like a QA environment, a staging environment, and a production environment. So scripting and having this process automatically done for you just it kind of avoids most of those problems. I wasn't really sure to do a slide, so I thought I would see what it would look like as a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
But I don't think this thing works as a Venn diagram. At the moment, it's just kind of overlapping circles. I think there's a thing in the middle you're supposed to put, but I don't really know.
Something, yes.
So here's a good slide that you could take a photo of and show your manager, and I'm sure that they would get on board with continuous deployment. And so, as the famous saying goes, Mario, you can't do continuous deployment without breaking a few omelets. So let's talk about the things that you're going to need to do continuous deployment. And these are the things. I think they're coming up on the screen. I can't see it. Did they come up?
Yep.
Great.
Oh, go back one.
Oh, it went up. Oh, no. It's all right. It's fine. So the first step of any continuous deployment process is feature planning. When you're starting to build a feature, you should get a couple of guys in the room and talk about how you're actually going to build this thing. You may think that it's going to take a month. And so the best thing you could do is try and break up those larger features into much smaller features, things that you can ship in a 2 or 3 day cycle. And so you take this big feature, you break it up into lots of smaller parts, and by the end of all those small parts, you've ended up pushing this much larger feature to production. You want to talk about how you're going to deploy it with zero downtime. We'll talk about later what zero downtime actually is, but sometimes you may be introducing a new stack into your technology. So like you might be bringing Redis in or some other technology. You want to think about how you can push this new technology to production without bringing up a maintenance page. And we'll talk about why maintenance pages are bad. And you need to also talk about how you're going to handle database migrations. Yep. Another one of those things that are really hard if you've ever done zero downtime deployments before, but they can be a real pain in the bottom. So we'll find out more about that later. Code reviews. This is how Bill Gates did code reviews back in the day with paper. There's a new tool. You may have heard of it. It's called GitHub. All the kids are using it. That's how we do code review these days with these things called pull requests. And this is what a pull request looks like. And so when Mario and I go to start a feature, I'll typically branch off master I'll do the feature, I'll push it up to GitHub and get a pull request review, and Mario will review it. There are a couple of tools to aid in this code review process. One of them is called Kane. Sometimes pull requests can get caught up in talking about Ruby style and quotes and single quotes, and this method's quite long. These tools can kind of help just get rid of most of those arguments, and then you can focus on the talking about the design of the code instead of just the nitpickies. Yeah. So Kane is a great tool, and Rubocop is also a great tool, and that'll look at see if your code looks like what the Ruby style guidelines say that it should look like.
Yep. Kane will actually statically analyze your code, so if you have any methods that are over a certain complexity, you'll get an error, and if we can integrate that into our build pipeline, it means that we're not actually deploying any code that's subpar. So.
Yeah. And the next part of continuous deployment is feature toggles. Everyone know what a feature toggle is? No one not know what a feature toggle is? Great, okay. I'll skip these slides. So basically, it's the act of wrapping a feature around a conditional, and you can toggle it on and off without deploying to production. The best way to think about feature toggles is just keeping it really, really ghetto. So if you're deploying a new feature to production or something, a new flow, for example, maybe think about just hiding the button that takes you to that flow. You don't really need to think about permission systems and those sorts of things. If someone can get to the new feature via the URL,
nice little treasure.
It's a nice little surprise.
Yeah.
Good on them.
Yeah.
They deserve the broken feature.
Exactly.
And so you can just keep this really good, keep it really simple.
Yep.
In the UI, put a little flag around the button, boom, you've just done yourself a feature toggle. A couple of tools to help you do feature toggles. There's one called Rollout. It's very, very simple. It allows you to use different backends like Redis, YAML, or Active Record. So that's a very simple one to use. A more advanced version of feature toggles is one called Flip. It's got a whole bunch of percentage-based stuff and more grouping controls.
It's got some UI stuff as well.
And it's got a UI admin thing that you can plug in so you control your feature toggles via admin. And that's a handy tool to have a look at.
Yep. So if we're going to be doing automated deployments, we're going to need automated tests. And the thing that we want to do with that test is we want to write just enough tests and no more. So we want to have enough confidence that we're testing the right things, but we don't want to write too many tests. And the reason for that is we're now coupling our tests with our deployment process. So if we have 5 minutes worth of tests, it means we can't actually deploy for 5 minutes. So the quicker we can get our tests, the more quicker we can get that feedback cycle happening. So a simple way to do that is to concentrate more on unit testing rather than integration testing, contrary to what was said earlier. If you do want some more information about how to do fast testing, if Corey Haynes is around, grab him. He's excellent at this. He did do a presentation at Golden Gate in 2011. So if you just search for Rails fast tests, Corey Haynes, Golden Gate, you'll get this excellent video, which will do it really good justice. Another thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do these smoke tests. So what a smoke test is, after we do our actual deployment, we're going to run some tests to verify that everything works as is. So traditionally, when you're doing manual deploys, someone's role is to actually check that the deployment has happened successfully. So after our deployment finishes, someone will usually check and make sure things like, does the homepage actually render? Just very simple things just to make sure that for example, the feature that we've just pushed out, but does the whole application break? And we can achieve that with smoke tests, and we can start building up enough smoke tests to get more confidence in each deploy. So these smoke tests, they run against a remote server. And as I said, they can be as simple as, does the name of the product appear on the homepage? One cool thing is you can actually reuse some of the tests you're using. So, for example, you might have a login test that runs locally. We can reuse that same integration test, just point it at a remote server. You can do that if you're using Capybara, for example. And then we can reuse those sort of tests. You do need to obviously be careful if you're doing anything with destructive tests. So, for example, if you have a test that destroys, to make sure that someone can cancel their account, you obviously don't want to be running that against a production environment. So you need to be a bit smart about how you do those things.
Zero downtime deploys. Essentially, the zero down deploy is the act of pushing new code to production without the user ever noticing that the deploy happened at all. One way some people use maintenance pages to do this. If you've got some backend changes you need to make, put up a maintenance page, do the production deploy, and bring the maintenance page down. But if you're doing if you're pushing to master 20 or 30 times a day, and you're automatically deploying master to production 20 or 30 times a day, that's 20 or 30 time deploys that a maintenance page will pop up, and that's going to be a pretty crappy experience for your customers. Yeah. So figuring out a way to do that without the maintenance page is quite tricky. Unicorn, Passenger, Puma all have ways to do zero downtime deploys. If you're on Heroku, you'll know that when you push to Heroku, the next request after a deploy will be slightly slower as the new dynos spin up. One way to get around that is to use the Heroku pre-boot feature. So you enable this feature, and you'll get zero downtime deploys, and it will be a much better experience.
It sort of runs two dynos, and then it'll swap one over after a certain amount of time. So you can start serving new requests on the new dyno once the deploy is finished.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about zero downtime deploys, there's a great RailsCast on it. If you just Google for zero downtime deploys RailsCast, you'll get all the information. There's a RailsCast on it. It's great.
So next is database migrations. Now, we mentioned database migrations earlier. It's quite a big part, and the reason why it's a big part is it's quite hard to do. So let's take an example of a typical database migration that we might do. So here is a migration we're going to run against our users table. So you can see we're removing the notes column. And what we might do is, for example, we might send a pull request, and we might remove all the code touching that notes column, and then we bundle that migration, we run it, we deploy, everything's fine. But what you probably see happening is this. So we're getting this error from our database saying that the notes column doesn't exist, which is sort of weird because we've already removed all the code that's going to be touching the notes column, but we're still getting this error. So the reason why this error occurs is when your Rails app boots, Active Record will actually inspect the schema of the table that the model is for, and it'll cache the columns that it needs to use. So if you do any inserts or any updates, even though we're not explicitly giving this a value, it'll still forcefully insert a nil value into this column. And that's why we're going to get this error. So if a user signs up, for example, after this, before the dyno restarts, you'll get this error if a user hits the sign-up page. So we need to account for that some way. The easiest way to do it is just put up a maintenance page. So in our deploy script, we can detect any harmful migrations. So this is quite good if you have, obviously, a low amount of users. You can detect if you're running a remove table, remove column, change column, anything destructive, and put it on the maintenance page. And then for all other deploys, we proceed as is. The better way, the harder way, is to do your migrations last. So there's actually ways that we can get around that problem with the schema. And if you check out, Pelo Bedra has an article about this exactly. And it goes through all of the different migrations you can run and how to account for each of them. So it's essentially just telling the models that the columns that we're going to look at don't include that one that we're going to remove. The other thing to be mindful of is database locking, right? So if our users are hitting our applications and are running some migrations in the background on our database, we might actually be locking on a row level or even a table level. So if we have any long-running migrations against an entire table and it's locked that table, it's going to prevent users from writing to it. So we might prevent people from signing up while we're doing a long migration. So you need to be careful of these things. If you're using MySQL, there is a tool called LHM, which will help you do this. If you're using another database, you'll have to check it depending on the type of database. So it varies, so you'll need to look up what's the best thing to do.
Yeah, so we're talking about automatically deploying to production. And sometimes shit happens. I think that's a nice way to put it.
Yep.
Shit happens all the time. For example, have you ever opened up your wallet, if you will, and have it catch on fire in front of your face? I mean, this happens to me generally most of the time. And I think that proves my point that shit happens sometimes, especially the first time I did that, face got burnt off. I was with that eyebrows for about 6 weeks.
It's not easy being a magician as a kid.
It's not easy. No. And so shit happens. Interestingly enough, this picture here is a picture from Perth Airport. And that's the screen that tells you when the flights are leaving. But
now it tells you there's no keyboard attached, so that's useful.
And it kind of looks like the Matrix, really. And so when you're doing this sort of deployment, what do you do when something goes wrong? The best thing to do is just roll forward. Don't roll back. And there are a couple of ways to achieve the roll forward. You can just fix the bug. Because your deployment process is automated, you can just fix the bug, put a PR up, write a spec, write a regression test, and then get it merged into master, and then it'll just go to production by itself. Sometimes it's just quicker to do that than to try and just do a rollback from production. Another thing you can do is just turn the feature off. Because we do feature toggles, if something's not working quite right, we can just turn the feature off, and that works really well. Another thing you can do is git revert and deploy. That's another great rollback strategy. Obviously doesn't work so well if you've got database migrations, but if it's just a few code changes, then you can absolutely do that. And in the worst case scenario, you can do the obvious thing and just turn on the maintenance page. Like if something's on fire at home, you just pull the plug out. I think it'll still be on fire after that.
But you'd have no power going to it. So
that's right. There'd be an electricity, which will help. Okay, so that was great. The next thing about continuous deployment is application monitoring. You want to make sure that someone's watching your application when you're not. And so a couple of ways to do that is using exception tracking. Everyone should be using exception tracking. If you're not, then I suppose you should. One of the great tools that we use is Bugsnag. It just catches Ruby errors and emails you. When you're pushing code to production every day, you may introduce performance regressions. New Relic, you've all heard of it. You should be using it. Now, a great tool is PagerDuty. If your app gets slower or you start getting an increase in exceptions, you can actually get PagerDuty to call you and let you know that something's wrong. So if you've just pushed it to production, you've gone to lunch, you might get a call from PagerDuty letting you know that you've broken the site. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Another good thing to track instead of performance metrics is maybe like signups. Signups per hour, sales per hour, X per hour, business level type metrics. Let's say you push to production and all of a sudden signups have dropped by 50% over the last 30 minutes. That might be something you're interested in. And so there's a great talk by David Goodlag called Business Metric Monitoring, which you can check out, and that'll tell you all about how to set that up in your application. And it's worthwhile doing.
Yep. So if we go look back and have a look at the ingredients, so these are all the things that we're going to use to do our deployment. So let's mix them together. I think it's time to mix.
I love mixing.
Love mixing. So let's start off with something very simple. So here's what our build server is going to do. So there's a couple flags up the top. They're just for printing out the output, and the other flag is just for if we have multiple commands, it'll stop as soon as it hits one.
It'll stop if one fails.
One fails. But essentially what we want to do is we just want to use Heroku. It's very simple here in this example, but we just want to push to Heroku. So basically as soon as we get into master, we're going to push to Heroku. So this might be useful for when you first start the app, just to get something happening.
This is the simplest way to do continuous deployment.
The most ghetto way.
YOLO, whatever you want to call it. If you put this as your build script on CI, you've just achieved continuous deployment.
Yeah. But so this is all you need. So after you're probably in production, getting users hitting it, you might want a bit more. So let's add some more good stuff. So now in our script, before we run our deployment, we're going to check the static analysis of the code. So by putting rate quality in there, that's using that Kane gem, we can actually statically analyze the code. And it means if you write a method that's too complex, a production deploy just won't happen, and you need to fix it. So it's a great way of making sure your code base stays clean like that. After that, we're going to run our tests. And after that, we're going to do our deploy. So now we've got the additional confidence of knowing that our tests are going to be run, and as soon as our tests are green, we do our deploy. And then after we do our deploy, we run an additional smoke test to verify everything is good. So this can just simply start off as, does the homepage render? Can I click a link? Simple things like that. So this is all very well, but we still don't have a huge amount of sort of confidence. We've got some level of confidence, but it's still a little bit sort of cowboyish. So the next thing we're going to add to our build script is we're going to add a different environment. So here we're actually using a staging environment, atypically to what you normally use it for. So after we run our tests and we verify everything is OK, we're going to do a staging deploy. And then we're going to grab those same smoke tests, and we're going to run those against our staging environment. If those all pass, so if we can render the homepage, if we click a few links, or whatever we've got to it by this point, we're going to do a production deploy. And then after we do our production deploy, we're going to run those sort of same tests. So now we have a good amount of confidence that our build is going to work. We're not going to break anything. And then after we've sort of done that, we can verify that the feature works independently by flipping the flag on for certain users. When we worked on Envato Studio together, we actually had a smoke test that would buy something on staging. So the actual marketplace, it would run through and a user would buy something using like the Sandbox and PayPal, for example. So unless you could buy something on the site, which is the key purpose, production deploy wouldn't happen, which was really cool.
Yeah, so our deployment process now has tests. And when you start thinking about your tests as a pre-flight check to deploying, it kind of lends itself really well to do continuous deployment. Now, we've looked at all the things that we're going to need to do continuous deployment. We've looked at the actual build script that we're going to use to get this thing to production. Let's mix it all together and see what it actually looks like for a proper flow. So how would you actually apply this? We do Desktoppr. the wallpaper sharing website with Dropbox backend. Mario, I've got a great idea for a feature.
What's that, Keith?
Social buttons.
Social media buttons?
Yeah, I heard about it.
What do you want to do?
I want to put them everywhere. On everything.
Let's see it.
And so I'm going to code this feature up. This is what Desktoppr looks like with social buttons. I've got Twitter. I've got Google+.
The good ones?
I've got Facebook.
2 LinkedIns?
I heard that gets you extra conversions.
Great.
And so I'm feeling good about this change.
Awesome.
I'm happy with it.
Yep.
So this particular change is in a branch behind a feature toggle. I'm going to push that to GitHub and get Mario to review.
Yep. So what's going to happen is I'm going to be at my desk, just writing some code, or reading a book about ponies, one of the two. I'm going to receive that pull request. It's going to look a bit like this. So I'm going to review the pull request, make sure everything's OK, and then I'm going to +1 it.
Did it work OK?
So I verified that it worked locally. It was fine.
Yeah, great. That's awesome. And so once Mario is +1 the feature, we hit the merge button. And now this button here is not just merge pull request. It actually also means deploy to production, which is pretty awesome. The build script runs that we ran before.
Yep.
It does the quality, it does the test, it does the staging deploy, it does the staging smoke, production deploy, production smoke. And I'm feeling pretty confident that if all these things pass and it gets to production, then production is going to be sweet. It's a plug. Buildbox, the startup that I'm doing,
yep.
This is what that process would look like in Buildbox, where you can split each part of the deploy process into multiple steps and have them all green. And if it's all green, then production is all green. And I'm feeling pretty great.
Awesome.
So once it's on production, nothing will look any different. The buttons will not be there, but the code will be there. The first thing I do is activate the feature for developers. Because I'm a developer, I'll activate it, then I will start seeing the social buttons. I think it looks great.
Yep. Then we might get someone to check over. I might have a look and go, yeah, that's what it did in my development. That's all great.
Yep. So Mario's happy. I'm happy. My boss is super happy because there's 2 LinkedIn buttons. And I think at this point we turn it on for everybody.
Yep.
And then that's it. We've just deployed a feature automatically without really having any sort of manual intervention.
Yep.
It's great.
So that's awesome. So let's have a recap of the things that we discussed, the qualities that we wanted from our deployment process. So we've got these 3 qualities in our Venn diagram. So we have our fast feedback, our confidence, and our predictability. So let's step through each one and make sure that we've achieved them. So the first one, fast feedback. We're getting our fast feedback because we're making sure our tests are quick. Every single time we merge to production, we know that it's going to... every single time we merge to the master branch, we know it's going to end up in production a few minutes later. So we've got our fast feedback. Our confidence. We now have an automated suite around our deploys. We now know that we can't actually... It's not possible using this process to deploy a failed test to production. It just can't happen because it's embedded in our process now. We can't ship bad code to production as well because we have that quality check in there as well. So any complex methods, any violations of ABC complexity, for example, just can't get into production, which is great. We now have more confidence. And we have predictability. So we've automated a manual process which can be error-prone. So rather than a person doing it, we've got a computer doing it, which we know is predictable each and every time it's the same. So we've achieved these three things. So let's compare 2 different products. So this is we've used some science here. These are 2 different products. They have about 4 to 5 developers each. They're both around about a year old, and they both run a Rails stack. So very similar sort of products. When we have a look, you'll notice that the product that we do continuous deployment on, we almost average 5 deployments each day. And when we're doing manual deploys, we're deploying much less, so slightly less than 2 times on average. This is for the same 2-week period with the same number of developers on each project. So you can see we're increasing the amount of deploys we're doing, so we're shipping much smaller chunks. There's much less chance of anything going wrong, and so we should have more confidence in what's happening. And we're just deploying more often, so more stuff hits production quicker. So if we could leave you with anything today, it's that you should always be continuously deploying. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.